I'm Angela Taylor, the co-chair of the food track and co-founder of the Dignitas Agency and Indulge Boise Food Tours. I'm here today with Treasure Valley culinary legend, Kris Komori, the chef and co-owner at Kin. Welcome to our fireside chat, Kris.
Hi, thanks for having me. Not sure if legend is appropriate for it.
Well, I'm sure as all of our viewers will quickly get to see, you are legendary. What you've been able to do here in the Treasure Valley ecosystem has been quite remarkable. I'm a huge fan of your food, of your story, of your innovative perspective and point of view, and look forward to having this conversation. You know, we're going to cover a range of topics with Kris today. And if any of you attending our fireside chat have a question for Kris, please feel free to type it in the chat box and we'll try to get to it over the course of the conversation. But just to get us started, Kris, would love to have you just give us a synopsis of your startup journey, what that has looked like.
Yeah. Well, I'd say in the last 6 or 7 months, it's been a little different. We've been almost in startup mode for the better part of 3 years now. It initially began when we were still at a different restaurant called State and Lamp. It's a small tasting menu spot. It was kind of my introduction into the Boise community. And it was great. You know, we had a lot of success there and we had a lot of fun. But we kind of had grown we hit the ceiling, both physically of the building and also just in terms of how we wanted to pay people and how we wanted to be a little bit more sustainable. So we knew we needed to grow a little bit. And that's where the conversation started of, you know, we pick up the core group and we drop it down in a slightly expanded version of it. And we never wanted to get too big, but we did want to have some other revenue streams kind of brought into it so that we could have a little bit more of that financial pay and sustainability. So that's when it started. I mean, it was probably 2018 when we started kind of talking about the issue or the move. And then we sort of floated around as nomads for a solid year before we even started construction. And that took another 9 months, 10 months. And then, of course, we were planning to open our doors in March. We got occupancy of the building of this new space behind me the day after restaurants got shut down in Boise. So,
oh wow,
it was at that point it was just kind of funny. You know, the timing was really ironic. So since then, we've all that planning, the business plan, everything, all the things we had talked about and systems, kind of fizzled away, and we had to change again. So that's kind of why I consider that we're in just a constant startup mode. We haven't opened the doors publicly yet. We haven't had guests inside. So yeah, we're just continuing to shape and grow and change and adapt. So
I love that. Well, first of all, your space is fantastic. Just I can't wait to be able to, whenever the new normal happens and we're able to sit inside of restaurants, come and enjoy your space. I know that between you and your team, you guys are really intentional about the little details. And so I can already see them showing up in the background and look forward to finding out more about that. Really curious. One of the things that I've learned through this process over the last few months during COVID-19, and what I've talked to a lot of our clients at the Dignitas Agency about is that COVID-19 has really been fertile ground for disruption and innovation. Right. And, you just alluded to it. You've had a lot of plans heading into 2020 and this vision for where you're going to go, and really holding this plan together for the last year or two with a team and a staff that you ported over from State and Limp. And just really interested in when you're looking at opening a high-end restaurants, like how have you pivoted? Right. And how can you build this sustainable model?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you that there's opportunity within this. We've looked at that opportunity in different ways, and we'll see, like in many different ways. It's supply chain, it's more sustainable pay for people. It's taking care of our employees a little bit better. And those are we're working towards those. This has kind of brought it much more into the forefront of the conversations. At the beginning, we always sort of spoke about morels. So morels are really big in Idaho and in this area. And the morel is an interesting little thing because while there's naturals that grow out in the woods anywhere, the majority of them that you see in restaurants and in stores are from burn areas. So they're from areas of the forest that burn down, everything's scorched. There's still little pine tips at the tops of the trees, but it's basically like just ash on the ground. And the first things that pop up are these morels. So they're really opportunistic, and yet they're also this thing that are like a gourmet ingredient, right? They're like highly sought after, and they're very resilient as a plant, as a fungus. And it was they're popping up right when restaurants were trying to get back open, and the parallel between it was really interesting to us. As we move forward into looking into fine dining, this has gone on long enough that our mentality has shifted around food. I mean, food is definitely meant to nurture and to comfort. It's something to be shared with people. It doesn't necessarily have to be high end. Because right now the necessity is just to feed people more than anything.
Right.
Now that experience and that joy you get from food is still a very welcome escape at times. So we know that that's really important. That's the experience of eating and dining is really critical to a lot of people in their lives. So we're both wrestling with, how do we do this kind of high-end tasting menu thing, but also give people what they really need right now.
Yeah. Well, so as you look toward the future, right, of how can you recreate, this high-end experience and what that experience will actually be, have you in the short term had to pivot your business at all? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah. So the business plan originally was to basically split the restaurant up into two sides. One was going to be a tasting menu, kind of a prefix menu, reservation only, and it's coursed out, and there's wine pairings and things like that. The other side was going to be a cocktail bar, which is where I'm sitting right now. And it would have a food menu that is a la carte, it's walk-ins, it's a lot more casual, it's meant to be shared, and have a plate, have a drink, go eat somewhere else downtown, and like kind of that vibe. Well, one, we can't have people inside, or we have chosen not to have people inside. And two, the experience of the communal sort of shared tasting room thing, it's just not going to work. So what we immediately did was we said, okay, if people can't come in here, we need to deliver food to people. We need to get the food out. And there was a problem that we had with takeout food in that you lose a lot of quality, whether that be temperature, textures, mainly. The product just wasn't what we necessarily wanted. So as we were thinking through it, we said, well, our big thing of a tasting menu spot is the service, much more than the food. It's the experience. It's that we're really trying to take care of people. So we knew that we needed to incorporate a lot of that in. And that's when we came up with the Kin at Home system, where we deliver it. It's a set price that includes gratuity, delivery, tax, everything. On the food side, it's kind of fun because we prep out these multi-course meals, and we do about 90% of the prep. We package it up as sustainably as we can, and then we say, okay, it's up to you to do the last 10%. We do video tutorials and things like that, and kind of walk people through. But it's fun because they get to play restaurant, and they get to plate and kind of do that stuff, and people are really enjoying it. It's cool because we still have the service aspect to it. We still put a lot of thought and care into it. And then the video aspect, although, it is a video, it's just a digital thing, but we're still kind of there sharing it. And then we ask for a lot of photos back so that we get the connection of the guest as well. So it's about as much interaction and connection as we can get right now, but it's done really well.
Right. I like how thoughtful it was that it's not just a one-way connection, right? When you think about your experience in a restaurant, it is both ways. And so that you did request those photos back in a unique way. And curious, if you can peel back the curtains a little bit on just your process, like you and your team, like how did you pivot? Like what were the conversations like? How did you come to this point where Kin at Home came to life?
Sure. I mean, so King at Home was the first thing that we started to shift. Just real quickly, we do have people outside on our patio. So we have been very, very blessed with just this huge grass hill. So we were able to implement that into an outdoor venue to a certain degree. It's still a restaurant setting where you make reservations in small groups, but we've been able to have live entertainment, music, dance, theater, things like that. That program, as well as King at Home, the priority was safety, safety for our employees and safety for our guests. So we knew how to make the food and we knew how to make the drink. We needed to implement it within the system that is prioritizing keeping people separate. And so much of the problems have been the software, getting people to understand the software, as well as just how to become totally contactless. As a restaurant, I understand that restaurants are, you're allowed to go inside, you're allowed to have patio seating. For us, a big concern has always been, well, we don't want our guests to feel like they have to wear masks while they eat. Like that just doesn't feasibly make sense. Yet we want to protect our crew. So being contactless was very important. And so just that as a priority, it has shaped everything that we've done. And in so many ways, the creative side of what we used to do with food has just become put into developing these new systems.
Interesting. Well, and I want to continue to probe here a little bit because I think that across industry, right, those leaders who actually took this moment, right, where we could all stop and give up and just continue to do the status quo until, right, we have more information about what's next, right? Those leaders and those innovators in whatever industry that actually paused and said, we're going to disrupt, right? We're going to shift our model. We're going to do something different. And we're gonna enhance our business, and maybe this becomes something that we can actually continue to do over time. Curious, what was the process in those decisions? Like, did you have to challenge your team to think innovatively, to stop, to take out like all those preconceived notions about what a restaurant and how it operates is? Like, did you have a whiteboard that you were just brainstorming? Take us into that room or that space where you were and coming up with this concept.
Yeah, I mean, we were heavily involved with our staff. Our staff is very, very close, and it's actually one of the reasons why we're called kin. Yeah. We feel like a family, and we bring everything to the table with everyone. Our financials, everything, everything is very transparent. We were having bi-weekly, multi-day, Zoom meetings as groups, trying to figure out what this was going to be. I don't necessarily recall the aha moment when we did it, but what we did decide early on was that we weren't going to plan for weeks or even months, a few months. This was at the beginning of it. So we just said, when we need to establish a plan for the winter, if this doesn't go away until winter, and if the worst thing, if the best thing would be for us to be wrong in terms of planning for how long this thing is going to last. And so that took the forefront. So instead of thinking, oh, let's buy a bunch of boxes and just pivot and do takeout food like that, we said no, because that's not going to make it the long run for us. Because takeout food is difficult. You lose, the restaurants are already so tight on margins. Now you're paying for packaging, and we don't have the benefit of selling alcohol, because alcohol in restaurants is very, very helpful. It's part of the reason why we knew we needed to go from state limit to kin and get a liquor license. So we wanted to get our culture and our spirit and what we do creatively with food out there, but we also needed to make sure that it was a system that was going to be able to last. So again, there wasn't necessarily a whiteboard with arrows pointing everywhere, and that yes, this is it. It's been fast. We've adapted fast in a lot of the things we did. but it was a trust in our employees and a trust that they could handle the ever-changing things. The real difficulty was at the beginning, getting everyone acclimated and adapted to the fact that everything is going to change daily. The stresses of that, when you're kind of used to routines and you crave that consistency in things, what we had to learn as a group was that the consistency is that everything is inconsistent. And once we got that, then we were able to like say, okay, this model's good, immediately move on to the next one and the next one and the next one, until we had about 4 or 5 different revenue streams coming in. And then we said, okay, now we need to hunker down and make sure that these run a little bit more efficient. So they just they were just flashing, someone would have an idea and we'd pick it up, we'd talk about it for a day, and then we'd run with it.
Right. Well, it's no surprise that you actually were able to have this iterative process where you had an exchange of ideas on a regular basis. And you mentioned it in your previous response, culture. Right. And I get the sense over the years, a couple of conversations that I've been in with you or where I've heard you speak about, your leadership style and your businesses, it is about culture. And when you think about the sustainable wages, and making that decision a couple of years ago when you, sold State and Limp and decided to pursue this new concept, there was a period of time in between where you didn't have, right, a restaurant. But I believe the majority of your team still remained with you over that time. While I'm sure income, wasn't, flowing in as steadily as previously. How do you stay committed to that model, and why are sustainable wages and how you're building this culture and shifting here in the Treasure Valley, I think, the culture around how you do build your restaurant business? Like, why is that important to you, and what are you doing to build that culture?
Well, I believe, and Ramey, my business partner, we've grown up in restaurants. And I know the deficiencies of the industry because I've lived through them. And the restaurant industry is archaic in a lot of systems, in a lot of ways. And one of them is that it doesn't pay well enough. It's high stress moments. There's a lot of mental health and depression issues within restaurants. And it's just not a very sustainable thing for people. There's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of turnover. Now, once I figured out that I was planting roots and staying in Boise, it was like, well, in 10 years from now, I want Boise's restaurants to be thriving. I want to have a list of restaurants that I want to go check out and I'm excited about that is longer than what I can actually get to. That's my dream, Boise. It's not just our business, it's everyone's, In order for that to happen, the system has to get shaken up a little bit. We can't have cooks getting burnt out. We can't have cooks looking at Boise's industry and saying, I'm not going to be able to learn there. I have to go to a different place. And in fact, that's not really what's happening. We're noticing a lot of people actually moving from larger cities into Boise because, again, it was an opportunity. Sustainable wage is difficult because, again, the margins are tight. People don't necessarily know how tight margins are and how poorly restaurant people get paid. There's a discrepancy between front and back of the house, but in general, even the front of the house doesn't get paid enough. So we are taking steps towards that. Now, right now, it's a little bit difficult, and I'll be totally honest with that. We are not paying what we would like to be, but we still have jobs, and we have about 18 employees, which for now is pretty good for us. But we know that it's conversations. It's about taking small steps, and it's about being honest to those. We take a hit on ingredients that we source because they're local. We know the farms, and they're a little bit more expensive, and we're going to take a hit on paying people more and giving better benefits as best we can. But the flip side of that is that we have this crew that is endeared and loyal to us. We don't have to retrain all the time. And it's not even retraining. It's that we are constantly changing menus and changing dishes. We're not a place that you learn a dish and it never changes. So you have to learn our system, which is that everything changes all the time. And we need to be able to trust in each other to do that. So turnover for us in our system is really difficult. So in order to combat that, yeah, we make it a fun place to come in. We give people ownership and responsibility of dishes and create on the creative side of things. And then we try to back it up as best we can by saying, we're going to give you as much as we can. It might not always be a financial paycheck number, but we'll give you family meal and other food to take home. We'll teach you the numbers. We'll give you other things that will benefit your career. So.
Yeah, I think that's quite unique where you see, ownership or, executive teams actually be transparent with the numbers. And one of the things around the restaurant business, we all glamorize the restaurant business, right? Whether we see it, portrayed on the big screen or on our favorite TV show. But it seems like this really fun thing. Like you're at a restaurant, you're feeding people, you're connecting with your guests all the time, you're eating great food, and it's just fantastic. But the reality of it, right? Our margins are extremely thin. And when you have a principle such as you of having quality ingredients, of supporting local, farmers and ranchers, and then having sustainable wages, so you're actually developing your staff, like, right? That's the difficult commitment to make. Have you ever rethought that? Like, has there been a time where you're just like, is this the right thing to do? Or are we going to be able to build this sort of culture here in the Treasure Valley that we want to?
I mean, yeah, I would say every day that passes through my mind, like, if we could just be slinging burgers, I don't even know, like that may or may not be better. But it's a little bit of like, we're stubborn about it, right? Like we have this dream of a place and we don't want it to go away. It can't be just us. We have a lot of restaurants, breweries, wineries, farms. There are a lot of businesses that are like-minded in it. And again, it's like anything. We realize that we're not going to make a huge change immediately. We have to be patient with it. And within that patience, it's exhausting because you have a lot of doubts that pop up. But, we just take small steps and we get small victories and, and those kind of lead us through this marathon that we're headed towards. But yeah, it's definitely, it's leaning on other restaurants. It's leaning on our crew. It's leaning on our families at home that honestly we do not give enough time to right now. So it's all a battle. It's all a battle to see this. We see a light at the end of the tunnel. The tunnel has kind of gotten a little longer, I'd say, but there's still a light there.
Oh, that's great. Well, and you mentioned the morale, like, right, and how resilient they are, in your story earlier. And that's actually the theme of Boise Startup Week this year. It's be resilient. And just curious, like, where have you surprised yourself about your resiliency, or as I like to say, being anti-fragile, where you actually get better as a result of the challenges that you're faced with, which is something that all startup owners, no matter where you are, founders constantly are facing that challenge where, right, you have a concept and then maybe when you open your business, right, there's this high and then you get your first, disappointing review or something and there's a low and you just go on this roller coaster ride along the way as you're on your journey, and it feels like it never actually changes, like, right, no matter how successful you are. But how are you and how do you find yourself to be resilient?
Well, I think, a lot of it, I'll start with saying that it's my wife, it's my family. She's given me a lot of strength and the ability to push forward in these things. She picks me up when I do have those things. She also gives me the time to be able to work on these things. So without that support, it wouldn't exist. But another side of it is it's the support of the crew, but it's also that I have a little bit of a blind, maybe naive optimism. I don't have a lot of highs and lows in general. It's just sort of like, we're just going to go this way. And yeah, it's probably like, I believe that creativity is almost like a muscle. Like you have to keep doing it and working it in order for it to stay sustainable. We all get writer's block. Yeah. But you just have to keep pushing through that. And then you learn to get through that. It's the same way with resilience or positive attitude, like you just have to keep going on it. And I guess I'm like a little bit naturally leaning that way of like, oh, it'll work out. It'll work out. In this time that has been tested more than anything, but it's also made the goal that much stronger. Our desire to push through it is that much stronger. As we watch restaurants and friends, establishments close, it drives us more. We're not as, we're not protected from any of this as any other place, but resiliency is just I guess we're just tenacious. We just don't want to give up the dream, and we don't want to compromise the safety within it. So we've been forced to pivot and to change, and it's been good. We're a lot stronger for it now.
Right. You hear all the time, innovate or die, right? Like, right. If you're not willing to change and disrupt and be creative and to, as you say, build that muscle of creativity, right, then sometimes you get left behind. And unfortunately, we have heard a lot about that, right, over the last few months. Is the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry at large has really been devastated by COVID-19 around the world, right? Not just here in the Treasure Valley or domestically, but around the world. And the other thing that's been discovered are the inequities in the system, right? What inequities have you all of a sudden had visibility into, maybe in this moment, that you didn't previously have visibility into, and how do you intend to change those?
Do you mean inequities within restaurants, or
within restaurants or society, right? That impact and affects you as a business owner and as a leader and as someone who is helping put food on the table for your staff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of that conversation of inequities is very pertinent to just what is happening in the country in general. Again, I'll just kind of go back to the fact that restaurants, especially kitchens, there's an archaic culture that is not necessarily as responsible as it should be, but not as modern and not just as thoughtful. And so the stresses of COVID, or I don't even think it's not even a COVID related thing. There are inequalities. There's gender inequalities, especially within this valley. There aren't enough female chefs and there aren't enough female cooks. So that's just something that's difficult to draw from. And we would always love more diversity in restaurants and in crews. Our kitchen is actually pretty diverse in many ways, and it helps us so much because everyone has a different food experience and a different life centered around how they dine and how food has affected them. So that's where we draw our creativity from. And we like differences to a certain degree, like we like contrast, and we learn from it and we're better for it. I'm not sure of like specific inequalities between our restaurant and others or within the system. There's always kind of a battle that we have of the local food and big box places. That's a distribution thing. That's a financial model, just because it is really important to us to support the local ecosystem, both environmentally, but as a small business support as well. There is a cost associated with that. And it's just about education to the guest as well, to say, the reason why your food costs more here is because there's a lot more labor involved, and we're sourcing ingredients that are not just flash frozen and coming from, wherever in the world they're coming from. So that is a difficulty, and that is another thing that is just small steps. But it's also something that we've never wavered from that. And I don't think we ever will.
That's great. Well, and you spoke to kind of the ecosystem. One of the things that was really intriguing to me over the course of maybe the first couple of weeks in late March, early April, as we're all rushing to the grocery store to stock up on our favorites, and like the shelves were bare, and you had limits to how much produce you can purchase, and all those different things. And then you see on the other side in the supply chain, right? You had farmers and ranchers that had all of this, inventory that they couldn't do anything with, right? And so between the shutdown of restaurants, which was where their supply goes, and the corporate headquarters shutting down, all those different things, like I had no idea that there's these two completely different supply chains, right? Kind of like the B2C and the B2B, when you think about the food ecosystem. Like, have you seen any shifts with that? Has that impacted your business at all? And what are some things from your perspective that we could do to change that?
Yeah, I mean, the dependence on the local farm and the small business was it was a little scary for us at the beginning, because we knew the timing was okay. Well, if all the restaurants shut down, then these farms that we know potentially aren't going to be able to sell their product, which means that as farms work, they're not going to have the money to pay for seed for the summer and for the fall, and then their fragile system gets all discombobulated. So we were really concerned about, okay, how do we support the local farms? Now, what we noticed was that a lot of the farms went to CSAs, the community supported agriculture, and the boxes that get picked up at different places. And the individual consumer was extremely supportive of it, to a point that where some of the farms weren't necessarily planned out, their crops weren't necessarily designed to go that route, but they essentially sold through they went through everything. And so we at the restaurant, we were like, well, I guess like we were trying to support the farms as much as possible, and then they had like everything sold. So we've been what's come from that is we just get smaller amounts from different farms, and we now have many more farm partnerships, as well as learning with some of the larger distributors and conversing with them about supply chain. It was definitely a pretty crazy thing for us, but we were somewhat protected by it because we don't have a static menu. So if we're looking for a specific ingredient that we can't get because of the lack of supply, we're just like, well, okay, we'll just change that dish, or we just can't do that right now, and we'll wait until we can get it. We've always been bound by seasons, and so we just know that, okay, in May we're not going to have eggplants, and now in September we don't have spring things, asparagus and whatnot. So we've always had creativity through limitations, and losing some supply wasn't a huge hit on us.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, and when you talk about just losing in this moment, one of the things that we know that here in Idaho in particular, right, there's 1 in 6 or 1 in 8 residents are food unstable, like, right? And I came across this quote from you, like, this is exactly why we all got into cooking, to help people, to nourish people, and to care for people through food. Can you talk to us a little bit about your partnership or your collaboration with the City of Good initiative, and what you've learned about yourself or about your business through the endeavor?
Yeah. So mid-March, early March, when this was all kind of starting to develop, I had lived in Portland in Seattle for a bit, and I was talking to a lot of friends that have businesses out there, restaurants, and they knew it was coming, and it was like talking to someone in the future. They're like, don't think it's not coming to you. So we started to very quickly make plans of like, okay, well, we're not going to get the doors open. There's a potential that all these people that we had just hired 2 weeks ago, we're going to have to lay off. So how do we make sure that our crew is taken care of as best we can, but also the entire hospitality industry? So really early on, we started to meet with Dave Crick from Bitter Creek Red Feather, and Michelle Anderson and Jin Yang from the Boise Co-op. We were having these daily meetings of just like, well, how do we support farms? How do we help feed the hospitality industry that we're all about to lay off? And inevitably, how do we get people back to work? Because it's not just the food, it's like kind of the despair of just like not knowing and being scared and not having something to take up your day. So that was kind of the three pillars: local food, getting people back to work, and finding a need for food that we built upon. And as it progressed, and as we started to get a number of like amazing community leaders to help us, it started to build and build and build. And we eventually hit a great partnership with the Boise School District. And we found a little need, or it's a huge need, but we found something that is pre-COVID and will be post-COVID, unfortunately, and that is just children that are not getting enough food. The school district is able to feed these kids Monday through Friday, and there is a program through the food bank to give them a little bit of food on the weekends, but it's still not quite enough. And so City of Good was able to kind of come in and get these, we call them weekend fuel kits. And we supply kids through the school district with 5 to 6 to 7 meals that get them through the weekend. And these are going out to Title I schools around. So what's been great on our side is that we are now making kids meals.
Wow, I love that.
We were going to be making these little finicky, look how nice or whatever. But now we're making food for kids that some of them are living out of their cars, and that has so dramatically shifted my perspective on food, as well as our entire crews, because there are different ways that food and dining nurture people. There's the straight like Maslow's law of like you need food to survive, and so we need to make sure that the food is as nutritious, nutrient dense, but still appealing to a child, which is a new challenge for us. We're used to a menu that you don't get to choose. We're just gonna give you whatever you want, and if you don't like it, well, kind of too bad.
Right.
But now for the kids, it's like now we have like that mentality is totally different. Like we need to sneak vegetables and we need to get vitamins and minerals into these things, but still have it be something that they're going to eat. And then on the other side of it, when we do these picnics and when we do the delivery, it's not so much of a nutrient nourishment, right? It's much more of the experience, a little bit of a reprieve of all this. And so that's now the new thing. We always knew that we were good at giving an experience, a celebration, a time to kind of like release from your daily routine. Now that is also bound with the very real thing of sustaining people, sustaining businesses, sustaining farms, and sustaining people that just can't have food all the time. And it's not just the food, it's also the uplifting thing. What we really like about City of Good is that the kids' meals, the weekend fuel kits, it's not just about food. I mean, that is the priority, but it's also about making these kids feel like they're getting something special, something for them to look forward to. And they do. We're getting feedback from it, but these kids are excited about getting these kids. And that little positive uptick that can be centered around food, I mean, that's everything that we can hope for right now.
Yeah, like I can hear it in your voice, and I could just see like that gesture will be amplified for decades to come. Like, right, like what you are doing in this moment right now is going to impact hundreds of thousands of kids and their families over their lifetime. And I know as a member of this community, we're grateful to have leaders such as yourself leading the way in such a compassionate way, right? You can tell that it's meaningful. You have a family, and you mentioned how important your wife is, and I know your son, like, right, you have family and understanding the value of food and the experience that you're creating. So thank you for what you and your team are doing in the community, not just at the high end, right, but for those that don't have access to quality resources such as the food that you serve at Kin. Kris Komori, thank you for your time. And thank you to all of you for joining us today here for Boise Startup Week and as part of the Food Trek. We hope that you enjoy all of our sessions, and we look forward to seeing you next time.